Our question today is from Vicki, a submissive whose boyfriend hasn't been into BDSM before and whose personality isn't normally the dominant kind. She's explained to him what she likes, and even though her boyfriend has been doing what she's asked, like choking, spanking, dirty talk, and bondage, she simply doesn't get the sense of being, quote, dominated by him. And she's struggling to explain to her eager boyfriend, who asks for feedback, what he could do differently to give her the feeling that she's looking for. The best that she can come up with is that she wants her, quote, ego to be broken in the process. But this vague instruction seems difficult to translate into some practical advice.
This is a really fascinating presentation of one of the core challenges of BDSM, is that the best BDSM is half real. It's not just a game. If your partner is treating it as a game, as a playtime, that unreality creates a disconnect that prevents it from touching your soul in the way that you want it to. On the other hand, you don't want it to be too real either. Oh, I'm your slave. Great, I'm selling you at auction. Buy it. That's not quite what you're after. I think part of what she's looking for here is a deeper engagement with the psychology that she wants, whereas what she's getting is merely the performative physical action without the driving impulse psychology behind it. It's an interesting notion. What does she mean by having her ego broken? I can speculate a couple things, but that getting into what that would feel like for her, what that would mean, what that would look like, when has she experienced it before, what would she need for him to be in, or what space would she need for him to be in psychologically in order for her to effectively feel that, is the big ask. And I think we can all relate to this in a very simple way. The notion, if I want to have sex with my partner and she is just spread eagled, just bored, not interested, just letting me masturbate into her pussy, that's not what I'm after. That's not what I mean by I want to have sex with you. She's engaging the action, but not the psychology that I actually want in the action. The intimacy, the enjoyment, the desire, the sexuality, all of that is missing. It is merely a performative action, some sort of duty sex that she's enduring. And so my question here is, how could she go about communicating better to him what she wants his psychology to be, and then can he actually figure out how to engage that psychology?
Yeah, I totally agree. She starts the question off by saying that his personality isn't normally the dominant kind. That's like a qualifier she puts in there early, and then goes on to say that she actually tells him this is the kind of things I like, and then he would go ahead and do those things. But this goes to a deeper question. We talked about this on the podcast before, is that if you're a female in today's world and you're looking for a dominant man and you're a submissive yourself, you're looking for a dominant man, it is really hard if you start telling the man that you want to dominate you how to dominate you, because that in itself is a dominant thing to do, to tell somebody else how to behave so that you can get the kind of frame that you're looking for, right? It's really hard. I don't have a good solution for this, because if he's not normally the dominant kind, then the sentence should stop there, right? And then she should ask herself, okay, how do I change that then? Because all of the other stuff, like, well, I like to be choked, and then if you spank me, well, that's a dominant thing also. But those are all, like you said, those are all the details. Those are all the ways in which it can be expressed in the BDSM way. These are all the rituals we've developed. But what came first was the archetype of there's a dominant and there's a submissive. And then the rituals flowed from that dynamic. And they're doing it the other way around. They're imposing the rituals, whereas he's not really embodying the underlying spirit behind the rituals. And it's not his fault. He's not normally the dominant kind. He's trying to be someone he's not. Maybe the reason she's not feeling it is because he's not feeling it. And how can you change that?
I think there's two sides to that. I'm sensitive to the challenge there and the complaint there. I recognize that it may not be fixable in every case. Probably in most cases it's not. But at the same time, even you're a good example of this, sometimes the light bulb just hasn't quite gone on.
That's correct.
And sometimes you just need to enact this and to live in that space for a minute or for more than a minute until your own personal engagement with this can turn on, and then you are transformed. And there's an interesting challenge there is he going to transform, or is that just not going to happen? And she is stuck in a position of trying to wait and figure it out. Yeah. I will say, so little plug, the follow-up book I have created called Workbook for Love is a Kink. It is a series of guided prompts intended for exactly this, to create a psychological inventory of the shadow and to present the desired psychology both for oneself and for one's partner, and for your partner to receive it. And there's a structured series of prompts for the partner after they have received this workbook and all the information in it, to how to process what you've received. So I created that as a resource for exactly these scenarios to facilitate communication at a deep psychological level, where hopefully the questions I've asked, and it is quite intensive, help pull out the exact details that would communicate to your partner what you're looking for, and giving them the opportunity to say yes or no in a non-superficial way. Not, no, I won't choke you, or no, I won't mean it, but do I even have that in me? Am I drawn to it, or am I truly just performatively doing it to make you happy, which is almost a submissive stance? In fact, actually, many women, I think, end up, if they're with a more submissive guy, many women end up being quote-unquote dominating to please him. It's a service top is maybe the kink term for it, but I think that's pretty common in a lot of ways. And it's a lot of what he's doing is he is service topping her, but he's not dominating her. And maybe that's language we could apply to the difference.
Yeah, I don't mean to tell Vicki the situation is hopeless, but what I will say is that whether or not this works or doesn't work is to a large extent entirely up to him. He either can enter this role or he is unable to enter the role. You can't drag someone kicking and screaming to become a dominant. That's just not a thing.
It's true. That's true, but at the same time, I think it is possible to acquire tastes. And so I think that just like acquiring a taste for anything, the challenge is that his ability to genuinely acquire the taste is limited by his desire to please her. So part of the way I recommend, and I go through a very detailed step-by-step recommended process in the book, Love is a Kink, of how to acquire a taste for a kink. And part of what I recommend is that he needs to engage in the action and ignore her response, not from a safety standpoint, but from a pleasure standpoint, and really focus on his own experience of what could I enjoy about this? What is pleasurable about this? How could I enjoy this for my own benefit? And that requires him to get really honest about his shadow. If she wants her ego broken, and that means being treated as an object or as a footstool, he probably in our modern society has never considered the notion that actually it'd be pretty hot to just read a book with my legs up on your ass and be able to look down and see your pussy dripping while I do it. And not give a shit about how comfortable or uncomfortable you are. That would turn me on. That would actually be a really amazing experience to have, and you're offering it to me. And I could accept it for my own pleasure.
Yeah, the workbook you mentioned would be a good way to have him enter. It's called the imaginal. You're trying to put yourself there in imagination. You're trying to believe that you're there in the moment. You're putting the clothes on, so to speak, even though you're probably naked in this situation. But point is, you're trying on identity, let's say, for size, and you're seeing if it fits. And it may not fit, and we don't know where this is going to go with him. But yeah, that's one way to do it. I remember myself, I did a very intense BDSM session, one of the first ones I've done since let's call it my conversion. Since that time, I vividly remember the very first time that I just went balls to the wall, very dominant, like just exactly the way we're talking about, full on. It was a trip, man. You're not kidding. The subtitle of your book is Sex Like LSD, right? That's kind
right.
of it was like LSD in a sense that I felt like a different person, and I really thought about, well, why does it feel this way? And it's because you are being witnessed to be a certain kind of way by another human being. And that human being is validating that way of your beingness. While I do agree with you that you can acquire tastes and you can try the so-called clothes on for size, that's all fine. It's a different thing, though, to actually inhabit the role, to be in it. That's not a taste. That's like, I am a different person now. And that goes a bit deeper than the taste. So I think acquiring the taste is fine, but if she wants her ego broken, I think what that by the way reminded me of Subspace, I think is perhaps what she was referring to. But if she wants that experience, then he has to become a person who is dominating her, not pretend to be the person who is dominating her.
You know, there's a very old movie, and it wasn't even that great of a movie, but it had a great intro. It was called Original Sin with Angelina Jolie. So it was a great start to a movie, at least. And the voiceover I always remember is that it's her talking. And it said, and she's a con woman or this or that. It says, when she was with him, she became someone else, someone more like herself. And there's a really interesting notion there. Is yes, that what you're describing of your own experiences, I became someone else and then found out that someone else is more like myself.
Yeah.
And that's a wild trip. That's part of the
wild.
LSD nature of BDSM. I think the real question, and by the way, when I say, and I make this very clear in the book, I'm like, hey, this is my outline for a process of how to acquire a taste. But it is not the case that all taste can be acquired by all persons. And in fact, I think this is a very small percentage chance. I find it relatively unlikely. But if that chance exists, here's the chance. And I think your case is an interesting one because you did find it. And Isla, who I quote at times in the book, I've also created a website, eroticarchetypes.com. And it's based in part upon her work where she did a really huge sex survey of sexual preferences and came to the conclusion that BDSM is a sexual orientation. That it is, in fact, if you look at the data, actually more binary than heterosexuality or homosexuality. It is more of a sexual orientation than gender orientation.
Wow.
And that's a really interesting finding, is that perhaps there is two different types of people in terms of their preference for sexual intensity. And so I really enjoy her terms. Actually, she called people with less intense desires tender sexuals. She called people with more intense desires BD-smexuals. And I thought those terms were quite clever. But the point remains that it is entirely possible that this guy can get into this frame, go there, explore his psychology, and just say, I just don't want to have sex that's that intense.
And then Vicki has to decide what she wants to do with that information, if it really matters to her.
I think I'm more, yes, that is absolutely true. I am more intrigued. I think that personally, it is very difficult, if not impossible, if these people are young, they don't have kids, they don't have other obligations. In our modern society, it is almost going to guarantee that the relationship fails long term, because she's already dissatisfied. If he can't find a way in, or doesn't want to find a way in, that's totally valid for him. Not everybody has to be into BDSM. Not everybody wants sex to be an LSD trip or to have an erotic life that is constantly on. That's something also that not everybody wants. But then they should go their separate ways. I'm to some degree more intrigued by the case as well of, what if it is what he wants? What if he is drawn to it? He's just having trouble admitting it. He's just having trouble with that last step of letting go, of transcendence, of saying, hey, actually, nobody may like this. Nobody loves the notion of a man dominating his girlfriend and whatever. That's not what our society promotes, and this and that. But it is actually more like myself. That actually is who I want. If the issue is his internal conflict, then there's hope in some sense for the relationship. He needs to figure out how to resolve that conflict. If there's no real conflict, he just doesn't like it and just is doing it for her to placate her, then there really isn't a process forward.